Attention, duped masses!
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato.
Tasteless Billboards, the basketball briberies, and Psychopathic playlist, plus this day in history with the Tylenol murders and our song of the day by WIBG on your Morning Monarchy for September 29th, 2017. I am James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. Welcome to wherever you are. Good morning, and thank you so much for listening. We are independent, non-commercial, alternative media for 12 plus years and running, streaming live at MediaMonarchy.com/listen. Glad you're here. It's a Friday. We're going to shut this month down. Last show of the week, last show of the month, and it is the Media Memes edition of your Morning Monarchy. That's when we look at the entertainment industrial complex, and we get all our stories from you. Everything you're going to hear over the next hour, we shared about an hour ago. You can find them at the top of the tweet, so you can find all the stories in the tweets. You can also find the link to the chat, where we're hanging out in the chat with our buddy Jake and Alex and Head and everybody else. A huge thanks to all the folks who hang out and listen in the chat. And listen live. We appreciate you. Hit that link, MediaMonarchy.com/listen. It should open up your Winamp, your media player, your iTunes, your VLC dynamite. We are not only crowdsourced, but we are crowdfunded, brought to you by you. Huge thanks to all our supporters at MediaMonarchy.com/support. And a big thanks to our latest donors via PayPal, paypal.me/MediaMonarchy. A big thanks to Dennis I.S. He is a regular generous donor. And a huger thanks to Philippe S. He gave us a pretty generous PayPal donation, and that really hit the spot. That's what we needed. I've definitely noticed our one-off donations have pretty much fallen by the wayside, as it seems like most people have now signed up for a monthly Patreon support. We can still use your one-off support via PayPal, and of course, there's also the cryptocurrency. We got the post office box, any number of ways that you can help support our work. As I like to say, if you can give a little, I can give a lot. Now let's glance at the breaking lamestream news before we dive into the entertainment industrial complex news. State Department orders non-essential diplomats and families out of Cuba following sonic attacks. And we have been following the sonic attacks for you day in, day out here on your Morning Monarchy. Acoustic weapons we reported for you weeks ago. And generally, I like to think that the things you hear on Media Monarchy happen before you hear them on the lamestream news. San Juan mayor says, damn it, this is not a good news story. The lobbying war on tax overhaul has commenced, and Air Force General addresses racial slurs on campus. You should be outraged. Well, we are. This is Outrage America, outrage culture, troll America. Racial slurs written on dorm room boards of Black Air Force Academy cadet candidates. Now, in a lot of these situations, whether it's black or white, red, black, we don't really mean. A lot of these situations anymore are false flag events. And we've busted a lot of those on these episodes. Whether it's swastikas or fake racist accounts on Twitter or blah, blah, blah. False flag events. Mom accused of leaving kids during European vacation appears in court. This is all the very important news you get from your lamestream alphabet news, and they also are serving up the fact check for you. Are more British nationals applying for dual nationality in the EU after Brexit? Better head to the BBC for that. Donald Trump wrongly blames hospitalized senator for GOP healthcare collapse. That's on PolitiFact. Can some horses grow mustaches? That very important story you can get from Snopes. Is the GOP plan for Medicaid caps really Bill Clinton's idea? Washington Compost on that one. And Kelly Clarkson clogged toilet at Victorian Mansion. Well, of course, you got to head over to Gossip Cop for that kind of important information. And it is that kind of day, I suppose, in some ways. It is Friday, September 29th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato. It's your Morning Monarchy. And in a lot of ways, we like to try and transition from one day into the next. Monday is world news. Tuesday's tech. Wednesday's food, health, and environment news. Thursday is occult conspiratorial day. And we ended yesterday talking about the new film from Egypt, which is actually Egypt's official Oscar foreign language submission. Basically, each country can sort of say, here's the film we want you to pay attention to. Sheikh Jackson. But, of course, the king of pop in the Muslim world. There's tons of propaganda here in the States as well. Oh my gosh, we have to wait until January for the 6-part TV event from Paramount, Waco.
You've looked to me to be your leader, to guide you on this journey. But I'm no leader. I'm a follower, just like you. God has instructed me to stay here and wait for his sign. This is our time to prove through suffering that we are worthy of the miracle that's to come. The kingdom of heaven is coming. I promise you.
Waco, a 6-part TV event. Michael Shannon, Taylor Kitsch, Andrea Riseborough, John Leguizamo, Rory Culkin, Melissa Benoist, Paul Sparks. Hey, we know that dude. We worked with him back at the Contemporary American Theater Festival back east. So Paul Sparks made it into that Waco show. So that's I already know the highlight for Cassie and I. 6-part TV event with Academy Award nominee Michael Shannon. So that's how we dive into your propaganda. It is the entertainment industrial complex, and we'll just use that jumping off point to hop to the next musical question. Why would anyone in their right mind put Charles Manson on a billboard? Well, WFMU 91.1 911 FM holds a special place in the hearts of rabid music fans in the greater New York City area all the way since 1958. The station in East Orange, New Jersey has been broadcasting sound waves from the farthest reaches of the known world to your lucky ears. They use a free-form format funded by listener donations that allows DJs to play whatever their twisted hearts desire. Want to bone up on obscure honky-tonk, East African hip-hop, or anti-fascist history? WFMU is the fantastic place for you. Yo La Tengo actually does a yearly fundraiser there where they play sort of a stump the band game where you call in and try and name songs that Yo La Tengo can't right on the spot play a version of. Pretty cool. Earlier this summer, WFMU turned to Kickstarter for a new way to engage its audience by encouraging fans to pony up or to buy a pony, a $5,000 ad on Newark's Route 280. The campaign joke described it as WFMU's first and last billboard, noting that the station is perpetually short on cash but long on ideas and innovations and looking to find more listeners in an area while promoting its new morning show, WFMU Wake with Clay Pigeon. So here's the kicker. Donors could choose the ad's theme by popular vote. And in the Kickstarter video, station manager Ken Friedman describes the project as an effort to take the power of billboards away from the man and give it back to you, the people. But things quickly went awry, as Adweek claims, as is so often the case with crowdsourced decisions. So they've got a new billboard that says Rihanna, Bieber, Manson. And it's got a picture of Rihanna, a picture of Justin Bieber, and a picture of Charles Manson right next to the station call letters in their logo, which looks not unlike the Dare to Keep Kids Off Drugs logo. WFMU in the red handwritten. And then the frequency, 911. So how did Justin Bieber and Charles Manson end up side by side on one of the options for the billboard? That's unclear. Though the station has definitely played Manson's music in the past, and passive-aggressive comedian and WFMU host Andy Breckman may have had something to do with it. Alternate themes for the sign included, "We're talking about your dead mother," the Nixon campaign slogan, "Now more than ever," and the always popular, "As unpopular as you are." My brother actually lives near there. I should ask him if he can see this or even take a picture of it. Why, this radio station just put Charles Manson on a billboard, and it admits it's tasteless. And it's another fantastic way that Manson and his specter hangs over this haunted house we call America. Now, I should have said a couple of minutes ago when I mentioned Snopes, y'all, it's not going to be the last time we hear from them. Let's head over to Snopes, shall we, for a fascinating bit. Did a 1990 comic depict Trump coming to power and building a wall? You bet your sweet Bippy it did. A 27-year-old comic strip by Peter Kupper. Have you seen his work? Kuper. He does a lot of work, actually, just sort of visually. I've seen so much of his work that has no letters, no dialogue whatsoever. He drew the Understanding Crumb book, or Introducing Crumb, the little kind of digest series of books that introduce you to this topic, or that writer, or this thinker. A 27-year-old comic strip by Peter Kupper received renewed interest on social media in 2017. A July 1990 comic strip in Heavy Metal magazine. You remember that magazine? They would sometimes hide it in the shelf with the Playboys. and that's also not the last time we'll hear about Playboy on this episode, featured a controversial wall in New York City built by Donald Trump and a populist rise to power by the future president. That claim, Snopes says, is quite true. Peter Cuppers confirmed it, and you can see the pictures of the comic. In September 27, there was a renewed interest in a 1990 comic strip by the artist Peter Cupper, which appeared to preempt current events by featuring the construction of a large, controversial wall by Donald Trump, as well as a populist rise to power. The artist Peter Cupper confirmed to Snopes that the comic strip titled The Wall is authentic and was published in Volume 14, Number 3 of Heavy Metal Magazine, July 1990. Its existence has gained new interest because Trump began his 2016 presidential campaign partially on the basis of a pledge to build a wall along the southern border of the United States. After his selection in November 2016, Heavy Metal Magazine ran a feature article on the then 26-year-old comic strip offering the summary of this. The Wall begins with a disavowal of well-known lines of The New Colossus, the poem associated with the Statue of Liberty. In this story, we're living in a divided city, New York, where the haves and have-nots can barely relate to each other. In fact, the cultural and economic divide has been made real in the form of a wall to keep the peasants at arm's length. Law enforcement had been overwhelmed. The cops were running for their lives. So a wall, the brainchild of Trump and real estate mogul Harry Helmsley. Leona and Harry Helmsley are also enemies in this comic strip. But the relationship between these two egomaniacs can't last, and in a fit of rage, Helmsley carries out a purge called the Night of the Long Skates. All Trump's associates are wiped out, and Trump himself escapes into the New York City sewer, where he plots his revenge. In this story, a pro-Trump group called the Guardian Demons band together in their hats, led by a messianic Trump who convinces his followers that Helmsley is the reason for their unemployment and the poverty they face. The mob carries Trump to a humiliating victory over Helmsley, a feat Trump promises to commemorate with a monument. The People's Monument, promised by Trump, is yet another wall. The final panels of the comic strip show a graffiti artist spraying "Dump Trump" on the wall, a slogan popular in 2017 among the president's circles. The article goes on, okay, so Trump isn't president in this 26-year-old story, but the man depicted is fully recognizable as the current president-elect. The tactics he used to motivate followers, the faith in the power of walls, the goddamn hats, it was all there. Peter Cupper said, quote, "The idea came to me after a visit to Berlin in 1987 before their wall came down. Trump was a well-known real estate mogul at the time. So was Helmsley. The pieces of the story fell into place." He also added, "I wish my pen, instead of predicting the future, would be able to change current events." Pretty stunning, pretty unbelievable. I will post that in the chat for you so you can see the pictures of that comic strip, and there it is. A shining achievement spanning north to south, commemorating all the little people who had helped Trump realize his dream. A symbol of the spirit with which it will be built. You're listening to The Morning Monarchy for Friday, September 29th, 2017. I am James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com, giving you all the news you need to know about. And as we told you a couple of weeks ago, it is now, as we are soaking in it, Banned Books Week. 4 days after America's next top president, swastikas and racist threats were scrawled on Reed College's library walls. Of course, that's back up here in Peak, Portland area. Students responded with a rally and messages of support. But Reed wasn't alone. Days after the election, more than 200 college and public school campuses and public libraries across the country dealt with similar racist and anti-Semitic incidents. In the 3 months that followed Trump's selection, after a campaign fueled by superheated rhetoric about immigrants, Muslims, and minority groups, the fine friends at the Southern Poverty Law Center gathered information on nearly 1,400 bias-related incidents like the one at Reed College. Between November and February, Oregonians reported 50 incidents to the Montgomery, Alabama organization. Washington reported 65, and California with the most at 154. Public libraries weren't spared. Many were thrust into the fray, putting them on the front lines in a highly charged political atmosphere. 36 incidents were reported at public and college libraries across the country in the weeks following the election. The incidents included anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, racist, and white national graffiti, and damaged or vandalized books, many about Islam or related topics. So our own local Portland Tribune has an article, "Bias Crime Info Joins Book Challenge Reports as Libraries Hang On to Neutral Grounds." In the nation's highly charged political atmosphere, a national group says dozens of incidents were reported at public and college libraries across the country in the weeks following the presidential selection. So they're trying to say, since it's banned book weeks, all of these sketchy events where people have claimed to spray-painted swastikas and all these allegedly racist attacks, that again, we maintain the majority of them are false flag events. Let's go to a legend, shall we? Well, listen, what does someone who's maybe seen some of this shit come and go a couple of times, what would they say? Well, comedian Mel Brooks says political correctness is the death of comedy. Mel Brooks is currently preparing to open his stage version of the film Young Frankenstein in London's Garrick Theatre. As the theatre prepares for a October opening, Brooks gave an interview about the show and his long career to BBC Radio 4's Rebecca Jones. Asked if any of his films could get made today, Brooks replied, no, I mean, maybe Young Frankenstein and maybe a few, but never Blazing Saddles, because we've become stupidly politically correct, which is the death of comedy. It's okay not to hurt feelings of various tribes and groups. However, it's not good for comedy. Comedy has to walk a thin line, take risks. Comedy is the lecherous little elf whispering in the king's ear, always telling the truth about human behavior. Mel Brooks has been called the patron saint of going too far. He says he likes that. Asked if there's anything he wouldn't parody, he said, yes, there is. I personally would never touch gas chambers or the death of children and Jews at the hands of Nazis. Everything else is okay. Brooks may never have gone that far, but he spent plenty of time mocking Hitler and Nazis with his films, as shown in something like The Producers. Now, that's just like the interview I was telling you yesterday of a much younger comedian, Jim Norton, who was rolling through town, who did a local interview and basically said, it's all the left. All the criticism is coming from the left now. It's almost reaching parody points, which I imagine has got to be really, really difficult. And that's the thing. When something is such a parody, when it's such a joke, it's hard to make fun of it when it's already such a parody of itself. I have to imagine that's really difficult for the guys at South Park.
Hey, you. That's right, you. Wouldn't you like to know the story of you? What makes you, you? DNA and Me is a genetic service that can help you find out exactly who your ancestors were. You might be surprised.
I thought I was just a standard white guy, but DNA and Me showed that I'm actually 4.2% Cherokee Indian.
Turns out I'm not totally white. I'm also part Northern Asian and even some Kurdish. I'm a victim of oppression.
I used to get in trouble for always using the N-word, but with DNA and Me, I found out that I'm 2.1% black.
Morning, Steve.
Sup, nigga? The test is easy. Simply swab the inside of your mouth and send it into our labs.
People made fun of me for being French. DNA and Me showed I was 8% Navajo. Nobody's making fun of me now, or my people, who were victims.
I'm 13% victim.
I'm 21% victim.
Order now and find out if your friends should be more sympathetic towards you. DNA and Me. Are you in? Hell f***ing yes, I'm in.
Of course he's in. Because South Park hilariously destroys victimhood culture and identity politics in their new parody ad, which again is only just barely a parody. Now we go to Bob for sports, as seems to be quite the popular thing at the time. Now we're talking to here in the chat, and actually, again, we are streaming live. MediaMonarchy.com/listen. Talking about PC movies that couldn't or wouldn't get made anymore. People noting some of their favorite moments. Actually, some say they saw Book of Mormon and it was a complete piece of shit. Do you remember the Michael Keaton movie, Johnny Dangerously? It's sort of a faux gangster movie set back in the 30s and 40s. It's got this scene with Joe Piscopo, who has a comically large gun, and they're kind of remarking about it. It's like, that gun's so good. He's like, yeah, it's so good, it shoots through schools. Yeah, they chopped that line out later in the reruns. Sometimes we can handle things, other times we can't. And right now, there's a whole lot of not handling things. I'm going to say a bunch of words here that don't make a lot of sense to me, but it's the overall theme and the story that you can see the arc and where we're going. Denver Broncos star pass rusher Von Miller knew very well that kneeling for the national anthem could cost him money. His teammate, linebacker Brandon Marshall, took a knee last season and lost endorsements. The same thing happened to Von Miller on Monday. Phil Longford in Denver said it wouldn't be continuously Continuing his, I'm really struggling with all these funny words. Phil Longford in Denver said it wouldn't be continuing its sponsorship agreement with Miller, the Super Bowl 50 MVP, who is enormously popular in Denver. A spokesman for Phil Longford told CBS 4 in Denver that it wasn't firing Miller, but it was in a contract renewal negotiation, and Miller kneeling for the anthem caused them to cut that off. Splitting hairs, perhaps, but the end result is essentially the same. We are evaluating the events of the weekend. It's important to state that we haven't fired Vaughn. We're in the middle of a contract renewal, and this weekend's events remind us that sometimes we feel that we best represent ourselves. We support Vaughn and his First Amendment rights. We know Vaughn, and he's a good person. He donated a police car to his hometown police department. Well, it kind of sounds like he's a dick then, but okay. All that notwithstanding, when we bring in celebrities to represent us, we run the risk of being misrepresented. And of course, America's next top president made comments last week which led to the largest demonstration seen among NFL players during the national anthem. Which again, we told you, the NFL had not been politicized until 2009, until Obama threw a bunch of money at them to do all these veteran propaganda events. That's our album art for Monday's episode. All the Army guys running across the football field with flags. It's kind of funny because you can look at them too and you can see their eyes darting over. They're just staring at the cheerleaders. And this is the super troll America, super sports world that we live in. Back and forth, black and white, all your little tribalist arguments. Sometimes people are making a lot of money off of pissing people off. You want to buy a piece of Lose Yourself? Stan and the real Slim Shady in a potentially pioneering venture. Shares in Eminem's entire hit catalog will be going public as the Bass Brothers production team offers part of its multi-million-dollar royalty stream for investment. Eminem music shares to hit the stock exchange. Those involved in the arrangement say it's first of a kind, a chance for investors, including everyday fans, to buy stock in one of the 21st century's most valuable music catalogs. A filing with the Securities Exchange Commission gets the ball rolling as the Bass Brothers and their partners head for a spot on the stock exchange. Mark and Jeff Bass, who helped develop the Detroit rapper, hold a substantial interest in every Eminem recording since 1999, when the Slim Shady LP propelled the artist-born Marshall Mathers into global stardom. Their Ferndale-based FBT production signed Eminem to a local record deal, back in 1995, transferring that contract to Dr. Dre's Aftermath Records 3 years later. Since then, FBT has enjoyed a royalty payout for all Eminem music sales, downloads, streams, licensing of tracks for films and commercials. The company said those earnings have grown significantly since FBT successfully sued Aftermath for royalties in 2011. They forgot about Dre. As Eminem's hit big on Dre's label, the Bass Brothers kept working with the Detroit rapper for several years, producing, co-writing hits like Without Me, Cleaning Out My Closet, and the Oscar-winning Lose Yourself. Pretty sure all those songs based on some other classic rock riff or something. Eminem continues to earn his own money from his songs and recordings, and he's not involved in the new royalty sale. Womp womp. So this sounds like something Bowie did at some point? Didn't we talk about Bowie stocks? I know he was really early on, and I don't know if Eminem will run for office, but golly gee, can you imagine how exciting it would be to see Kid Rock versus Eminem? Holy Detroit Rock City. You're listening to The Morning Monarchy, and we are looking at the entertainment industrial complex, and there's not a whole lot that makes more money than video games, but there is one thing, and that is the ever-popular sports ball. I'm shocked at this story. The U.S. Department of Justice charged 4 assistant college basketball coaches, 2 Adidas marketing executives, a clothing company founder, and 3 athletic advisors, alleging a web of illegal activity among top-tier schools with Adidas sponsorships. The Justice Department claims that Adidas Director of Global Sports Marketing, James Jim Gatto, hey, Jimmy the Cat, along with another Adidas employee, Merle Code, and several other people, paid bribes to high school basketball players and their families. The 4 NCAA assistant coaches named in the indictment include Auburn University's Chuck Connors Pearson, Lamont Evans of Oklahoma State University, Emmanuel Richardson of the University of Arizona, and Anthony Bland of the University of Southern California. Let's hear it for their bribery and corruption schemes. According to a document released and authored by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who conducted the investigation, the understanding that the students would attend schools sponsored by Adidas on scholarships and then sign contracts with the company when they went professional. They would also agree to retain the services of sports manager Christian Dawkins and financial advisor Munish Sood. Jonathan Brad Augustine, president of student-athlete nonprofit The League Initiative, and Rashawn Michelle, founder of a formal clothing company based in Atlanta, were also arrested. In the complaint, Michelle is identified as an athlete advisor, while Augustine and Code were both called individuals affiliated with Company One, or Adidas. Gatto, Code, Dawkins, and Sood allegedly worked to funnel money, totaling in the low six figures, from the NCAA Division I schools in question to at least 3 players. According to the complaint, the scheme would allegedly defraud the universities by rendering them ineligible to participate in Division I basketball, in addition to requiring players and coaches to lie about whether they or the schools employing them had knowingly violated any league rules. The document goes on to claim that Gatto and Code created a sham purchase order and invoice used to justify Adidas expenditures, since it could not lawfully pay the players or their families. The charges include bribery, solicitation of bribes, wire fraud conspiracy, honest services fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud, among others. Some of the 10 people charged face potential sentences of up to 200 years. Yeah, we'll hold our breaths that that'll happen. Adidas and many of its just as dirty competitors, like Nike, which also employ some of those same now indicted criminals, have long-standing relationships with the NCAA and certain specific schools. Today, we became aware that federal investigators arrested an Adidas employee. We're learning more, and we're going to fully cooperate. Shocked I am at the sports industrial complex.
That's right. Yesterday, the FBI at the U.S. Attorney's Office arrested 10 people for bribery related to college basketball, both in placing athletes at certain colleges and to get them to sign with advisors when they turn pro. At least 6 schools were implicated, including top programs like Louisville, USC, Arizona, and Miami. These serious allegations, though, may not come as a surprise to those who closely follow college sports. There's an ever-growing list of schools facing punishment for illegal payments over the years, including Michigan, Ohio State, USC, and Syracuse. Adidas executive Jim Gatto was also arrested. He's 47. He spent his entire 24-year career with Adidas. He was hired by legendary shoe executive Sonny Vaccaro. And yesterday, Vaccaro told CNBC this has been going on for decades. Shoe companies using their money to influence which colleges players would select. Adidas has said Gatto has been put on leave and the company is working with outside counsel on the investigation. And the NCAA said it finds these charges deeply disturbing. It has no tolerance for the alleged behavior. But the big question is, will the NCAA do anything about it, given how much money is at stake? It takes in $1 billion a year, and it says another $11 billion or more flows through college sports annually. A lot of that money comes from apparel deals, from Under Armour, Nike, and Adidas. They have 9-figure sponsorships with multiple schools. So with so much money at stake, and over 350 Division I basketball programs, it could be extremely hard to stop this kind of behavior. Back to you guys.
Eric, I'm sort of interested, obviously, in the Adidas piece. As someone who's covered that company, it feels like, and I don't know what we've heard officially from some of the regulators and the Attorney General on this, that it's not a systemic problem within Adidas or any of the other apparel companies, that they really singled out this one guy who is now placed on leave. Is that the sense you're getting? I'm just wondering from an investor point of view if this is going to influence sales or just going to be sort of a black eye for the company.
So the charges are obviously against just this one employee at Adidas. The rest of the employees are either coaches at other schools or other things. Again, as far as a public company goes, he's the only one. If you talk to people in the industry that know how these things work, like Sonny Vaccaro said, this has been going on at places like Nike and Adidas for a long time. In the investigation, though, they said that one of the players was getting $100,000 to go to an Adidas school, but there was another company that was not named. They were offering $150,000 for that kid to go. So there is clearly another company, at least, that was already mentioned but not named in the investigation.
They lock countries and own companies. We had nice cars and sneaker money. That's the corruption running rampant in the sports industrial complex. And Nike is just as guilty. There have been cases here in the past. Both of those companies quite cozy up here in the Pacific Northwest. Adidas have one of their major world headquarters. It's only listed after their main German headquarters right here in Portland, Oregon. You're listening to The Morning Monarchy with the corruption of the entertainment industrial complex. Streaming live, MediaMonarchy.com/listen. It is a hashtag Media Memes Day. And a quick note about more awards for propaganda. McCann, New York's Fearless Girl campaign for State Street Global Advisors won 4 Grand Prix at the Cannes Lions this summer. But just the other night at the Clio Awards, it went better, picking up remarkable 5 Grand Clios. The renowned Wall Street statue, which became an overnight sensation when it was placed in Bowling Green Park in March, took the top prize in the branded content, events, experiential innovation, out-of-home, and public relations competitions. In addition, McCann New York won Agency of the Year, and State Street won Advertiser of the Year on the strength of that work. Now, Fearless Girl, of course, is connected to some of the criminal cronies that helped run Occupy. You know, like that dude Micah P. White. Really suspicious operative who set up shop here in the Pacific Northwest and suddenly wanted to run for office and tried to start basically a bunch of arguments that didn't exist in a small town. Pretty much like exactly a COINTELPRO agent provocateur. Yeah, that guy, you know how he hijacked and stole and kidnapped the Adbusters website because he wanted to sell posters with Fearless Girl on top of the Wall Street Bull. That's how that all went down. Micah P. White, those crazy weirdos who now work for Google and work on their transhumanism stuff, all the shady, fake, left foundation-funded phonies. And you can tell. I mean, even their work is already winning massive awards on Madison Avenue. And even if that wasn't a phony Adbusters, George Soros, Occupy-funded idea, that's how the powers that shouldn't be roll. They get to luxuriate and sell back the garbage right to you. Like Fearless Girl. Means about as much as the bullshit on Wall Street. So it sounds like everything's pretty dire, right? I mean, essentially, it basically looks like Twitter doubling the character limit is going to directly lead to World War III. I'm still waiting for the ability. I don't think I've seen, I still don't think I can tweet that long. And I know by the time you finish reading someone's 280 character tweets, you have to be woken back up. And we'll wake you back up right here on your Morning Monarchy. John Carpenter's classic Christine soundtrack drops as a special edition today, this Friday, 9/29. Pretty interesting one. We're just trying to kind of dive a little bit into the horror of the entertainment industrial complex. Following the posthumous albums Michael and Escape, it would appear the well of unreleased Michael Jackson material is running dry. As we told you a couple of weeks ago, there was a flurry of excitement as a new album was announced earlier this year, entitled Scream, due to go on sale today. But the only new music on it is a mashed-up version of 5 relatively deep cuts tacked onto the end of a compilation, one that is fascinatingly awkward in its presentation of Jackson. I think we're setting the stage pretty well for it to almost be the month of October. The month of Halloween. MJ's one of the few stars to become so big they burn brightly long after they've died. He earned more than $100 million every year since its death. The jukebox musical Thriller Live still plays on the West End, and his iconography, gloves, light up pavements, Chamon, all remain etched in our culture, but perhaps mindful of the way that another seemingly permanent supernova, Elvis, is dimming in our collective consciousness, Jackson's record label Epic is using Scream to repackage him for a new generation. Timed to mine maximum Halloween coin, Scream reflects the King of Pop's affection for this time of year and its themes of costumes and disguise, darkness and light, character transformations and surprise, reads the press release. Scream's artwork features bats and a full moon and trades on Thriller's celebration of cinematic horror by framing Jackson as theatrically phantasmagoric, a kind of horror movie character. It attempts to deflect our attention from his real-life freakishness. But it ends up underlining it all the more. The title track is not about a scream of delighted Halloween fear, but of pure frustration. One of the most interesting things about Jackson is how everything seems to tighten as his career progresses, from his dance moves to his chest and throat as he sings, initially lithe and in control on Rock With You. By the time of 95 Scream, he is audibly contorted in his pent-up rage. Leave Me Alone is similarly wretched. A psychological study rather than a funhouse ride. Dirty Diana, Dangerous, both also included on the compilations. Howls of a different kind. Those of a man repelled by his own lust. On the latter, he says, she came at me in sections. He seems so terrified by women that he has to disassemble them. Jackson's use of horror movie tropes, meanwhile, is catnip for armchair psychologists. His joy in Thriller's chorus, singing of the thrill of cinematic fear, of course written by Rod Templeton, is perhaps the joy of escapism. The scares are safely hemmed in by the four sides of a screen. But elsewhere, he uses the vocabulary of horror films to directly express his personal fears on the song Ghosts, which gets into a strange area. Clyde Lewis has dived into the short film Ghosts and all of the death masks of MJ. In the song, he characterizes jealousy as a phantom who stalks his house. Jackson himself becomes a ghost on Threatened, a fantasy of control where he moves omnipotently around a love rival. Is this man so famously denied a childhood, having to grasp at film imagery to make sense of how he feels in lieu of a proper grounding in emotion? By framing these songs together, Epic have further underlined how complicated Jackson was and further defined him as the strange, sexually fraught person that the compilation is perhaps trying to make listeners forget. The unavoidable fact is that his music was a scream in every sense. So writes Ben Beaumont Thomas on The Guardian. Michael Jackson's new album shows the terror in the king of pop soul. And it is perfectly timed for Halloween, but again, it gets to the deeper darkness of everything that we talk about here on Media Monarchy that is within the entertainment industrial complex. Now, I said Monday when I first mentioned it, we'd pay honor to him all this week, but I didn't pull it off. But here now on Friday is where we will pay tribute to the screaming eagle of soul, Charles Bradley. His career took off in the 2000s after years spent on the periphery of the music industry, including time spent as a James Brown impersonator, has died at the age of 68 from cancer.
Soul singer Charles Bradley has died. That's him last year appearing on CBS This Morning's Saturday Sessions. Bradley spent decades working odd jobs and performing as a James Brown impersonator before winning fame and acclaim late in life with 3 albums for Daptone Records. He was renowned for his searing stage presence. In 2016, he told Pitchfork, quote, "I'm singing the truth. I put my heart and soul into it. If you're gonna sing, sing from your heart and the world will hear you." Charles Bradley had been battling stomach cancer. He was 68 years old.
Legendary soul singer Charles Bradley has passed away at the age of 68 following a year-long battle with cancer. The tragic news comes about a year after Bradley announced that he was diagnosed with stomach cancer. Though he eventually returned to the stage following several treatments, Bradley was forced to cancel the remaining fall 2017 dates of his tour after learning that the cancer had spread to his liver. "I love all of you out there that made my dreams come true. When I come back, I'll come back strong with God's love. With God's will, I'll be back soon." Bradley began his musical career in the late 1970s but remained under the radar until his late 60s. According to Rolling Stone, he finally caught his big break when Daptone's record co-founder Gabriel Roth saw his James Brown impersonation and connected him with producer Tom Brennick. Shortly after, Bradley would release his debut studio album, No Time for Dreaming, which was followed by Victim of Love in 2013 and Changes in 2016. The latter project received wide critical acclaim, with most of the praise going toward the title track, which was a cover of Black Sabbath. Following the news of Bradley's death, artists and fans paid their respects online. Bradley's death comes less than a year after the passing of another Daptone soul legend, Sharon Jones.
It is with a heavy heart that we announce the passing of Charles Bradley. Mr. Bradley was truly grateful for all the love he's received from his fans, and we hope his message of love is remembered and carried on. Thank you for your thoughts and prayers during this difficult time. That was the statement on his official socials. And yes, as the clip just said, that was indeed an Ozzy song. It's actually Black Sabbath. The Black Sabbath. Now, I haven't confirmed this, but we've already told you last month, and I've actually had some of you say, like our good friend Nicole, that you heard about Charles Bradley from Media Monarchy. That, in a lot of ways, is the best of what I like to do here. Shining lights into places that you maybe hadn't seen light shown. I have not confirmed this yet, but we saw Charles Bradley twice last month. I told you, we saw him at Pickathon. And when you play Pickathon, essentially, you play at least 2 shows. So we saw him Thursday night play the big main stage, and then we saw him the very next night play the more intimate Woods stage. What I cannot confirm is that, indeed, we did see Charles Bradley's final performance. It's always difficult to try and look up shows in the past. It's always easy to look up the shows that are coming up, but the ones in the past, it's really difficult to look up. R.I.P. Charles Bradley, the Screamin' Eagle of Soul. In other health and entertainment news, Aerosmith singer Steven Tyler says he's returned to the United States for medical care, and the band is canceling the last 4 shows of its tour in South America. Tyler said on social media Tuesday that he flew back to the U.S. on Monday after a show in Sao Paulo, Brazil. He says he is not in a life-threatening condition but needs to deal with a medical issue immediately to maintain future scheduled performances. The band's canceled 2 shows this month in Brazil, in Chile, and 2 shows next month in Argentina and Mexico. Now, I have to imagine, and again, hardly anything happens just sort of accidentally. There are teams of producers and consultants and advisors and publicists, and I would imagine that even if Julia Louis-Dreyfus hadn't won a record-breaking, I think, 6th Emmy for Best Actress this Sunday for Veep, I imagine whether she had won or lost, they probably were ready to announce a couple of days later that she is indeed not invincible, and that Julia Louis-Dreyfus announced she has breast cancer. 1 in 8 women get breast cancer today. I'm the one, the actress shared in a post on Instagram and Twitter. So in some ways, we go from breast cancer to the death of Hugh Hefner, silk pajamas wearing founder of Playboy who helped steer nudity into the American mainstream. Died Wednesday, the magazine announced. He was 91 years old. Hefner, who in 1953 founded the trailblazing brand that would help usher in the 20th century's attitudes and their shifting attitudes towards sexuality, he died of natural causes in his Beverly Hills home, famed Playboy mansion, according to a statement from Playboy Enterprises. Now, I thought I had a clip, but I apparently do not have a clip all teed up for you. However, you know who Hugh Hefner is. You know all about him. James Brown probably had to sing his 68 hit Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud for a lot of white people over the years. Nowadays, there's something especially perplexing about watching old videos of him doing it in Hugh Hefner's living room with blonde bunnies scattered cross-legged around the floor. But in 1969, there was nothing strange about it at all. Hefner, the robe-encased Playboy publisher, who died Wednesday at the age of 91, was hosting his second TV variety show, Playboy After Dark, in 1969 when Brown visited to perform his Black Power anthem. It was par for the course at Playboy. Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. were all interviewed at length in the pages of Playboy. The very first Playboy interview, in fact, was a conversation about race between writer Alex Haley, born on August 11th, and Miles Davis in 1962. Hefner's first TV show, Playboy's Penthouse, 59 and 60 seasons, showed Ella Fitzgerald, Sammy Davis Jr., Nat King Cole. Essentially, this fantastic article on Paste is pointing out that Hugh Hefner was a champion of black music back when it mattered and back when it meant something. And this article has embedded YouTube clips of Playboy After Dark when you can see Ike and Tina and James Brown play. Actually got those DVDs a couple years ago. That's one of the best reasons I think I've maybe mentioned to continue doing the Netflix discs. Because you can find all kinds of things that you would never want to spend a bunch of money on. So you can get all those Playboy's Penthouse, Playboy After Dark episodes. Fantastic interviews. British tabloid Metro has stoked some controversy by running not exactly a contest, but it was a bit of research trying to find who was the most important British band. And they used criteria like iconic songwriting partnership, revolutionary and original, era and generation defining, legendary live shows, controversial, divisive and memorable, passionate fans, musical longevity, life-changing songs, and something indefinable. Which Metro in the UK says just about sums up the Smiths. 30 years since the split and still the best British band ever? ? As we start to wrap up this entertainment industrial complex edition of Your Morning Monarchy, a few more media stories. The FBI file on outlaw icon Johnny Cash spans between 1969 and 1982, capturing the transition from his dark, drug-fueled days and the associated property damage that came with it to a concerned parent worried about anonymous threats against his family. Released following a FOIA request by Muck Rock editor J. Pat Brown, the file begins with Cash's summons to court on charges related to a 1965 fire in L.A. The fire, which was allegedly started by a defective exhaust system in Cash's camper truck, destroyed 508 acres of the Los Padres National Forest and nearly wiped out the region's California condors. Johnny Cash paid $82,000 in damages. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $500,000, and that's just one of the stories you can read about in the FBI file on Johnny Cash. He once burnt down a national forest, and other stories. Playlist of the Lambs, another one from The Guardian. Psychopaths may have distinct musical preferences, and you will dive into this and love it. Contrary to the movie trope epitomized by Alex in The Clockwork Orange or Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs, psychopaths are no fonder of classical music than anyone else, though they do appear to have other musical preferences, psychologists say. In a study of 200 people who listened to 260 songs, those with the highest psychopath scores were among the greatest fans of the Blackstreet #1 hit No Diggity and the aforementioned Eminem's Lose Yourself, based on, of course, Aerosmith. That one rated highly, too. The New York University team behind the work stressed that the results are preliminary and unpublished, but the scientists are sufficiently intrigued to launch a major study in which thousands of people across the psychopathy spectrum will be quizzed on their musical tastes. The media portrays psychopaths as axe murderers and serial killers, but the reality is that they're not obvious. They're not like the Joker in Batman. They might be working right next to you, and they blend in. They're like psychological dark matter. About 1% of the general population meets the description of a psychopath, but the figure is far higher in prisons, where about 1 in 5 has the disorder. One estimate from Kent Keel, a psychologist at the University of New Mexico, suggests that psychopaths cost the U.S. government $460 billion a year. You don't want to have these people in positions where they can cause a lot of harm. We need a tool to identify them without their cooperation or consent. And that's the dark, strange turn that this article takes. Are you essentially suggesting the idea that we use people's musical preferences, which are all created or rather cataloged from our new tech overlords, to create new psychopathy parallels? Well, according to what you've been listening to on Apple Music, you're a psychopath and goons are on their way to your door. The composers behind Strange Things soundtrack announced a new EP with Survive, the fantastic music made for the first season of Stranger Things. The soundtrack is probably going to be just as rad for the second season. And something else I want to give you the heads up on. We may have mentioned it before, the Great 78 Project, but there is a Twitter account that basically every 10 minutes tweets a 78 RPM from the Internet Archive. It's in multiple formats, and they were captured using 4 styli. That's 4 record needles at once. Pretty interesting. And it is New Music Friday, my friends. Hashtag New Music Friday. New sounds today from eBay, Kamasi Washington, Primus, J. Roddy Walston in the Business. Belinda Carlisle has kind of a religious-y, new age, chanty kind of album. Vessels, and there's music from Proto-Martyr and Miley Cyrus and Shania Twain and Demi Lovato. You can find that and everything else we just discussed in the show notes, as everything we play and say always in the show notes. Our 5th and final day of new indie music from right here in Portland, Oregon will conclude with music from a band formerly known as Wooden Indian Burial Ground. More on that coming up in just a few moments, but first let's do this day in history, my friends. September 29th, 1789. The United States Department of War first establishes a regular standing army with a strength of several hundred men. We were talking about standing armies and standing members the other day. September 29th, 1829, the Metropolitan Police of London, later known as the Met, are founded on this day. And we jump to the 20th century, 1954, the convention establishing CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, is signed on this day. September 29th, 1960, Nikita Khrushchev, leader of the Soviet Union, disrupts a meeting of UNGA with a number of angry outbursts. You guys were talking about the dead for a second in the chat earlier, I believe. On this day in 1967, Mickey Hart joins the Grateful Dead. September 29th, 1975, WGPR in Detroit, Michigan becomes the world's first black-owned and operated television studio. And on this day in 1982, a sick 12-year-old girl in Elk Grove Village, Illinois, unwittingly takes an extra-strength Tylenol capsule laced with cyanide poison and dies later that day. She would be one of 7 people to die suddenly after taking the popular over-the-counter medication as the so-called Tylenol murders spread fear across America. The victims, all from the Chicago area, ranged in age from 12 to 35 and included 3 members of the same family. Johnson & Johnson, the maker of Tylenol, launched a massive recall of its product and offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the person or people responsible.
Thanks, Pete and Robin. Extra-strength Tylenol capsules laced with a cyanide are linked with 5 deaths in Chicago, and that number might be changed to 6. Some of the bottles from the affected shipment have been found in Florida. Eckerd Drugstores in Clearwater reports that they pulled them off the shelf within hours of hearing about the potentially deadly pills. But as Chris Abel reports, none have been found in Central Florida.
Poison Control, can I help you?
For nearly 1 solid hour, nurses at the Orlando Regional Medical Center comforted fears of local residents. Callers had heard news that cyanide-contaminated Tylenol capsules had killed 6 people in Chicago. Authorities suspect sabotage. Here, nurses report no cyanide cases.
We are letting know what the number is, the lot number, and giving them some symptoms and just basically reassurance.
Across the Orlando area, stores checked their extra-strength Tylenol stock. Many stores removed it, like stores in 31 other states. But here, some stores left the product, pending further word from their corporate headquarters.
This bottle of Tylenol came from a box with a manufacturer's code that was different than the code reportedly contaminated. Upon checking, Eyewitness News discovered that no store in the Orlando area carried the contaminated bottles.
None of the merchandise we had in our stores matched the manufacturer code number that was supposed to be contaminated.
So why'd you pull it off the shelf?
Just to be on the safe side until we can find more information out on it.
The Tylenol manufacturer has recalled 93,000 bottles of the suspect lot. They were manufactured in August. Florida did receive some of those bottles. Medical authorities in Chicago are recommending that no one take the Tylenol capsule until authorities obtain more information. In Orange County, Chris Abel, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
September 29th, 1982, the Tylenol murders. Continuing to look at this day in history, September 29th, 1984, Prince's single Let's Go Crazy hits #1, meaning he then held the #1 single, album, and film simultaneously. Only the Beatles had accomplished that feat previously. September 29th, 1988, NASA launches STS-26, the return to flight mission after the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. September 29th, 1991, the Haitian coup d'etat. 1992, Brazilian President Fernando Collor de Mello is impeached. And on September 29th, 1998, the family of Frank Sinatra filed a suit against Ross Stores Incorporated for copyright infringement. The suit alleged that an album of 75 songs, the Sinatra Collection, was unauthorized. That coming probably less than 6 months after Frank Sinatra had died in 1998. Have I told you why I always remember that Frank Sinatra died in May of 1998? Because I had just gotten arrested, and it was the end of the school year, and my parents were disappointedly coming to pick me up from my college town, and we were staying in a hotel before we made the rest of the drive back to home. Staying in a hotel, I remember sitting in the hot tub that actually had some windows that you could open and then see the TV in the main room. So while I was luxuriating in the hot tub, thinking about what I had done, all that was on television were all the retrospectives about Frank Sinatra, who had just passed away that week. Rebel without a clue. Finally, on September 29th, 2008, following the bankruptcies of Lehman Brothers and Washington Mutual, which we reported for you at the time, Washington Mutual, of course, was a controlled demolition by J.P. Morgan and the FDIC. Collusion behind the scenes. You can dig back into the Media Monarchy archives for that. Just search Washington Mutual, WAMU. Following the bankruptcies of Lehman Brothers and Washington Mutual, the Dow Jones Industrial Average falls 777.68 points today, the largest single-day point loss in its history, thus signaling very openly the controlled demolition of our fake economy. Because all those criminals had already moved on from their big terror scam, they moved on to their next scam, the funny money scam. Published to my own website a decade ago today, Kucinich may force Cheney impeachment vote. Representative Dennis Kucinich said he's so concerned about what he sees as the Bush administration's push for a war with Iran that he is considering using a parliamentary measure to force an impeachment vote on Darth Cheney. Iran says CIA and U.S. Army are terrorist organizations. Lawmakers in Tehran take a diplomatic offensive against Washington. And the third and final story published to my own website a decade ago today. That's why we say past is prologue. It's the little seeds that were planted back then that are now growing nasty fruit. The latest absurd marketing scheme from Merck. That's right. The cervical cancer vaccine for boys. Gardasil for boys. Celebrating birthdays today, September 29th, 1881, Ludwig von Mises, born on this day. It's also Enrique Fermi's birthday. Journalist Diana Vreeland, actress Greer Garson, famed singer, actor, and businessman Gene Autry, born on this day. Also film director Stanley Kramer. And earlier when I was reading off some of the birthdays to Cassie, I'll mention some of the birthdays as she's heading off to work. I said, Stan Berenstain. And she said, don't you mean Berenstein? Like, oh, no, don't you know? It's Stain. Even LP knows that it's Stain. Stan Berenstain, creator of the Berenstain Bears, born on this day. Oh yeah, and it's our buddy Andy. Andy has bad taste. It's his birthday. Welcome to your 30s, my friend. It's also Jerry Lee Lewis's birthday, the killer. Now, actually, I accidentally jumped over it because I was getting to the Tylenol stories in 1982, but on this day, actually, in 1976, September 29th, 1976, on Jerry Lee Lewis's birthday, he was charged with shooting a firearm within the city limits. He hit his bass player, Norman Owens, twice in the chest while attempting to shoot a soda bottle. Woo! Happy birthday! It's also Mr. Unga Bunga himself, Silvio Berlusconi's birthday. Author James Fogle. Actress Madeline Kahn, Jean-Luc Ponty. It's also the wild, shirtless lyrics of Mark Farner. We mentioned Grand Funk recently on your Daily DJ Set at Noon. It's Bryant Gumbel's birthday. Gabor Supo, Anne Bancroft, Alan McGee, the founder of Creation Records. We started to watch the Creation Records documentary Upside Down a couple days ago. Julia Gillard, the former Prime Minister of Australia. Radio host Stephanie Miller, the aforementioned Primus leader Les Claypool. It's his birthday today. It's also Suede's Brett Anderson's birthday. And Erica Eleniak, speaking of Playboy, she might actually be one of the earliest people I recall seeing in my buddy Joey's copies of Playboy. So even when I see that name now, I go, oh, Erica Eleniak. It's also Russell Peters' birthday and Scout Niblet. Some of those musical folks might make their way into our daily DJ set at noon. If I've got enough production time, I'll put together an entire New Music Friday episode for you, coming up in a couple of hours. But we'll wrap up this episode and this week of your Morning Monarchy with your fifth and final slice of indie music from right here in Portland, Oregon. The band formerly known as Wooden Indian Burial Ground have now changed their name to just WIBG, which was the style at the time. We're going to listen to a song called Sunshine from their forthcoming record, Winnie and the Nihilist, coming out in November. WIBG, wrapping up your Morning Monarchy. I thank you so much for being here and listening and taking part. We got that latest episode of New World Next Week out this week, and all the other independent, non-commercial alt media that you help support. MediaMonarchy.com/support. Huge thanks and love to y'all. Appreciate you so much. And you can always reach out to me, James at MediaMonarchy.com. Of course, I'm very active on the tweets, and you can pretty much always hit me up in the Discord chat. And there it is, the Media Memes edition of your Morning Monarchy for Friday, September 29th, 2017. And I am James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Again, thanking you so much for listening, at the bottom of my heart. And reminding you, as always, don't hate the media, become the media. Take care.
listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato. Since 2005, Media Monarchy has covered the real news about politics, health, technology, and the occult, all remixed with music and media that matters. Go to MediaMonarchy.com/support and become a monthly subscriber so you can help keep independent, non-commercial, alternative media going and growing. Thanks.